All right, so Google Gemini just dropped a brand new model. It's part of the Gemini 2.5 Pro family. Looks like it's an update to that model. Here they're referring it to as the I/O edition. In the AI Studio, they refer to it as the 5.6 edition, May 6th edition. And this is probably one of the models that they were testing in the weeks prior that had various sort of strange code names like Nighthawk and Dragontail. I forget all the names they had, but there was like a bunch that they were testing, and this is probably one of them. By the way, just in the last several hours, there's a new leaderboard on the Web Dev Arena leaderboard on LLM Arena. For a long time, it was Claude 3.7 Sonnet, and just, I think in the last couple of hours, it switched to this new model, Gemini 2.5 Pro Preview 0506. So this is the name that we're seeing here and in AI Studio. In this tweet, they referred to it as the I/O edition. Again, I'm pretty sure they're talking about the same model. We're going to test it out both in the AI Studio and here in gemini.google.com. But what we're expecting to see is some excellent coding abilities, specifically with web development. And as they mentioned here, you can build interactive web apps in Canvas. So if you head to gemini.google.com, here's what that's looking like. Select the 2.5 Pro model, the experimental. This is also where you can find a deep research, by the way. And we're going to be using Canvas. So let's test it out. Create a 3D app that simulates, what should it simulate? How about walking around a city? That's a great thing to simulate. All right, so here it pops up as I'm doing this, recommending that I test out 2.5 Pro. I can try it out. I'm literally trying it out as we speak, but thank you. And so here it is writing the code. And so if you are not aware of what Canvas is, Anthropic was the first model to use that name. It's basically simulates the web app. It kind of just runs it in the environment where you're doing it. So if you're talking to the chatbot, it just makes that app appear in a little sidebar. So if it's a web app, it just shows you what that web app would look like. It's a game. It tries to just render that game. And so here it switches from code to preview once it's done. And as you can see here, we can move forward, move backwards, strafe left and right, and look around. Wow, that's actually kind of impressive. You can look up at the tall skyscrapers and this is looking good. You got shadows. I can apparently just walk through the buildings, but so far so good. I mean, from the first attempt, this is looking really good. So I kind of built a city and we're able to walk through it. Wow. We're going to say, let's add roads and traffic. Right before doing this, I got a coffee at Starbucks. And as you can see here, the barista over there added a little heart to my coffee cup. I think I made a good impression. Either that or they added to everyone's cups. Who knows? Oh, but our game is ready, our walking simulator. So it's looking good. All of a sudden, for some reason, our left and right strafing got reversed. Okay, I noticed this happens every once in a while with these models. And I mean, it's looking good. We got the cars moving back and forth. The only issue is that we have buildings in the middle of the road. So we need to fix that. So I'm going to say, make sure buildings don't appear in the middle of the road. Strafing is inverted left and right. And I'm also going to say, increase mouse sensitivity for looking around. So as I'm looking at the chain of thought here, it's very complicated. I think it's trying to figure out how to make sure that the buildings don't appear in the middle of the road. And it's kind of going deep. So it's like the road, if one exists, is at x equals 0. And then it tries to figure out how big the buildings can get versus where it needs to be placed to not intersect with the road. So that definitely threw it for a loop. I feel like that took some time for it to really think through and generate this code. All right, so we're back in our city and look, it's a car and it's not crashing into any buildings because no buildings appear on the road. This is actually beginning to look phenomenal, I gotta say. Very, very impressed with this. I almost got hit by a car there, but let's see. This is looking good. Seems like we're in the UK somewhere, right? Because we're driving on the left side of the road. All right, that's cool. So I'm liking everything about this. They fixed the strafing left and right. The cars are moving. There's not too many cars moving around, but I mean, everything's looking very, very good. So yeah, I'm definitely liking this. Let's add some more features. By the way, one thing that's interesting to notice is we do have the previous version. So we have some sort of a basic sort of version control that we're able to go back if we mess something up. We're able to share the canvas with other people. It even has a console, which I'm not sure what we're able to do with that. Maybe just outputs errors and stuff like that. Doesn't look like we can type anything in or like to install some software packages that we want. But this is looking very, very good. As far as I know, this is the first time we're seeing a canvas in these Gemini apps. All right, so this is one of the first things that I've tried to do with this new version of Gemini 2.5 Pro, and it's performed flawlessly, very, very impressively. So what I'm trying to do is create a city simulation that specifically focuses on traffic. So the movement of cars, a system of traffic lights, red, green, etc. So let's walk around. I'm going to show you what we've built here. So WASD to move around, click and drag to see left and right, up and down, etc. So there are pedestrians, but they're not super, I didn't focus too much on them, so they kind of just there as props, I guess. So they kind of walk around, but don't worry too much about them because that was just one prompt. I didn't really focus on what they were doing. But let's focus more on the cars. So here are the cars. So as you can see here, they kind of have some texture on them. They have some windows and maybe headlights and stuff like that. And there are different cars. There are things that look more like buses, things that look more like cars. Although I'm not seeing too many buses here. Let me see if I can find one for us here. I'm just seeing one type of car for some reason. But no, we had tons of different ones. Okay, here we go. I found one. So that green thing or that purple thing is a bus. So this is a bus. You see, he's got one wheel. The wheel on the bus goes round and round, just like the song says. That's, I would guess, some sort of a truck. Yes, it's getting truculent. But let's see what else we got here. So everything was built one thing at a time. So initially it was just cars going in a straight line. There was no textures. Now, as you can see, they are turning and stopping at the lights. So lights can be green or red. So red is, I don't know what's happening there. Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. That's not supposed to happen. I have to fix that. But yeah, I think sometimes it turns. Now that I think about it, they're driving on the wrong side of the road. We are not in the UK here. They should be driving on the right side of the road, but that's an easy fix. Here's yet another bus with one wheel once again. And one thing that's very cool is the day-night cycle, or at least I can toggle it to be nighttime. So this is nighttime. I tried to add some sort of atmospheric effects from the lights. So as you can see here, I probably should move my head out of the way, huh? So as you can see here, there's a little bit of a atmospheric lighting, if you will. So as you can see, there's green and red kind of shining on here. So when they light up, you can see that. I tried adding headlights, but we ran into some issues, so I decided to let it go. But one really interesting thing about this Gemini 2.5 Pro canvas especially is it does have a sort of version control. So you're able to go to the previous version, you're able to go to the next version. So for example, when I tried adding the headlights, the game would not render. This is kind of what that would look like. And I mean, something's happening because I can toggle day and night, but there's nothing else going on. And so I tried a couple different ways to fix it. It didn't work. But guess what? I hit this button twice and I'm back to, the version that did work. Everything is working fine. So if you find yourself going down the wrong path, so to speak, you just revert the changes. Again, it's very, it's not GitHub. It's a very, very simple kind of a version control. But man, for this thing, it's phenomenal. And as you can see here, this whole thing is enclosed in beautiful sandy beaches and even an ocean in the distance. So this is some sort of an ocean city. Some cars do still think that they're off-road vehicles and also amphibious vehicles, I guess, that just go into the ocean. But that's confidence. I gotta say, I'm very, very proud of them for taking initiative, I guess. All in all, this is very impressive. I loved how easily it was able to do everything. And also there was a lot of iteration. So for example, let me walk you through from the very beginning what it took to get here. Okay, and this is where you really get to see the magic of this thing, because this is a version 1, right? So using these little buttons, I'm able to go back to the very, very beginning of time, if you will. You can see here, no textures. You can clip through these buildings. There's no streets. There's nothing. Initially, I said this is going to be a walking simulator. And so that's what it built. So, not too exciting, but again, we can iterate. And this thing probably due in large part to its large context window. It can iterate very, very well. Version 2 looked a little bit better. All of a sudden, we have cars, as you can see, that are also clipping through buildings, and the roads are a little funky because you got all the buildings just on top of them. But as you can see, the cars are very low res. I think they're just blocks. Let me see if I can take a look at, it's hard to see because they're inside buildings, but yeah, it's basically just a block. All right, so this is kind of a version 2. All right, so now we're getting a little bit further ahead. It really had to think about this for a while. I definitely threw it for a loop because I said, hey, the buildings shouldn't show up in the middle of the street. And I was thinking for a good 1 or 2 minutes, trying to figure out how to write some sort of a script, some sort of a rule-based thing so that these buildings would not show up in the middle of the road. And it did. So as you can notice here, it's really good. Not a single building popping out in the middle of the street. So phenomenal. All right. Next, we added pedestrians and some sort of a light system, traffic lights. So you can see here, these are traffic lights. If you stare at them for long enough, you'll figure something out. They don't work. So, first iteration wasn't the best, but that's okay. As you can see here, they're just blowing through the red lights. No one cares. It's just like LA, actually, now that I think about it. These pedestrians are just like running across the street with no regard for anything. Also kind of like LA. And sometimes they'll just randomly disappear while walking down the street. Also kind of like LA. But let's see if we can make it better. Oh, here the big change was a solid building. So I didn't want to be able to just walk through buildings. That was kind of a little bit annoying. So we added a solid building. So now buildings are not, we can't just clip through them. And also we fixed the movement. So sometimes the D keys would get inverted. So that got fixed. Next, we have traffic lights fixed. So now, as you can see, the red and the green and the yellow kind of, they go through their cycle of traffic lights. I don't think anyone's stopping for the lights quite yet. So nope, they're still blowing right through the reds, narrowly avoiding collisions. Next one is we've improved the traffic light logic. So now, as you can see, yep, okay, so this one actually stopped where it was supposed to, and it's waiting for the red light, and once it turns green, it'll continue on its merry way. Phenomenal. Really, really good. So they're not blowing through the intersection, nearly crashing into other cars. Everything's working. Perfect. Pedestrian sidewalk alignment fixed. I attempted to fix the pedestrians a little bit, but I also didn't want to focus too much on that because mainly I wanted to create a traffic simulator. So I think this is a cool paint job. Look at that. If your car glitched like that in real life, that'd be kind of cool. Anyways, pedestrians, they got better. So at least now they're walking on the sidewalk instead of just zooming across the street wherever they want to see. To use the crosswalk. That's phenomenal. They're learning. Next, Gemini 2.5 Pro. I'm so proud of it. It called it realistic vehicle models, which is, I'm going to say, ambitious. It's ambitious. I asked it to create something that looked a little bit more like vehicles. I wouldn't call what it created realistic, vehicle models, but okay. So, you can tell this is like a sedan. You can tell that that's maybe a truck. Yeah, some sort of a industrial vehicle, I guess. And also, I believe it added buses in this update. Buses are somewhere here. I don't know, but there are buses. I know there are. I think that big red thing is in fact a bus. But notice it drives directly into the other car. We are having issues, so these are just merged together. So that's going to get fixed in one of these patches. All right, here we go. Vehicles queue at lights. So this is actually where we fixed that issue where, if one vehicle approaches from behind the other, you can kind of see that here, they queue. They don't just sort of merge. They wait their turn patiently. So as you can see here, one vehicle, two vehicles. Perfect. Next, we're adding some texture to the vehicle. So as you can see here, these sedans are now resembling some sort of a double-decker bus. But at the very least, we have some textures. Buses actually looking pretty good. Then we have improved textures because I told it, hey, those vehicles are looking kind of insane. Let's add some wheels. Let's add some headlights, etc. So, I'm going to say it did better. So let's see if our bus has that one wheel. Not yet. Let's see what else they did. So it did improve the vehicle textures a little bit. I think this was like the first improvement that we made. But yeah, now vehicles can turn. Now it struggled with this for quite some time. Basically, what I wanted them to be able to do is, turn like that and continue. But for some reason, as you can see here, it turned, it stopped, and then it like went the other way. So the logic was a little bit off with the turning. But eventually we were able to nail this issue. But it took a couple back and forths for Google Gemini to figure out how vehicles should navigate these streets. All right, next we added some crosswalks and we added some new textures so that the sort of intersections looked a little bit different. So it wasn't too just grid-like, so we kind of have these things going on. So it's looking a little bit better. Here we attempt to correct the vehicle turning. I don't know if we nail it on. I think that took 2 or 3 tries. Again, these things are, nope, still it's kind of having some issues. We added textured buildings, which I think definitely brings the whole thing to light. I think, you know, with some more textures here and there, with the crosswalk textures, with the car textures, it's looking a lot better. Somewhere along the way, I also added the, you know, the ocean and the sandy beaches to try to, you know, kind of capture everybody within the city, but they're still just going off-roading and into the ocean as they see fit. So that didn't work. All right, vehicle turning re-verified. So vehicle turning now works a lot better. As we saw, it's still not 100%, but it's better. Let's see if we can glimpse one of these things turning. No, it's still messing up. I decided to add a starry night sky. So as you can see here, if we get, what's interesting is we can't really see the stars too well here, but if we get to the edge of the city, they kind of come out, which is kind of cool, kind of nice. So we're here on a beautiful starry night on the beach in front of the city that we've built. Very cool. And there it goes. I've added a day-night toggle that broke things. Now we have a day-night toggle with the error fixed, so we're able to, you know, do this basically day and night, not cycle, although we could probably add a cycle pretty easily. We have all the sort of the stuff that we need for it. Then we have emissive lights and brighter stars. So this is where we added the lights from the stoplights. And let's see, brighter stars. I can't tell if they're brighter. I'm not seeing any stars, to be honest. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, they are there and they are brighter. Almost seems like it's just a wall of them. They're not really over the city. They're just like a wall that goes straight up and down. Okay. And we, of course, also have our daytime. So as we sit here on this beautiful beach looking at the stars, here are some thoughts that I have about how well it performed. First of all, it's very strong in a lot of different ways. Again, as we try to pile up more and more functionality on top of it, sometimes things break and sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to keep adding stuff. You know, with that said, this is one of the best models at that, probably in large part due to the fact that it has that massive context window. Also keep in mind that we're not using something like Cursor or Windsurf. We're just playing with this within the chatbot with the canvas enabled. So it's just shooting out one huge sort of page of code and then it's just running that thing. You know, if we had more of a structure with different files and stuff like that, this could be a lot easier. We can just focus on one thing at a time, add one functionality at a time. Here, it keeps having to just like, you know, one shot, redo the whole thing every single time. With that in mind, I would give it an absolute A. This was very, very well done, even though we ran into like the grid issues and the churning issues and stuff like that. I feel like, you know, if I had to start at the beginning, I would probably approach it a little bit differently. I think that part of using the stuff is kind of developing an intuition about how to best approach doing these things. I think what I should have probably done is just started with just the grid system, with just the cars and the traffic lights and the traffic patterns, the lights, and just really nail that thing, and then begin to add all of the sort of the other pieces like the textures and this and that. And it's very likely, I think some people kind of, let's just say, well, of course, that this is how it's supposed to work, but if you take a minute before starting like this to think about exactly what you're trying to build, and from the very beginning actually take the time to tell the model what you're trying to do, and then start kind of iterating on top of it, I think the results would be much, much better. With that said, its ability to just continuously just roll with whatever insanity I threw at it and do a pretty good job of doing that, I got to say, it's very, very capable. It's very impressive. So definitely an A. I recently started watching the Three Body Problem on Netflix. It is phenomenal. Wow, I'm very impressed with how well it's made. But, I wanted to see if I can recreate the three body problem within Gemini 2.5 Pro, including what I thought was very interesting in the series is they try to simulate the view, how that whole thing would look sort of from the planet's surface. And the first time I saw it, I was very confused. I'm like, what am I even looking at? So here on the right, this is sort of the planet's surface, and we're able to see the other stars, kind of the other bodies move in space. On the left, this is actually kind of like the more solar system view, whatever you want to call it. So as you can see here, this little green thing, that's our planet. That's where we live. And the other three bodies that are floating in space, you can say they're, for example, three suns, for example. And as everything's slowly moving around each other, our little green planet gets caught by the gravitational pull of the other three large bodies, and it changes our orbit. Each object affects all of the other objects. And this is a very hard problem to sort of simulate because we have no idea where this stuff will end up. So in this particular sort of simulation that I've ran, it's more or less for now a little bit stable because we're just rotating the big red star. And you can kind of see here like the other stars in the background. There's the yellow star that's kind of off to the side here. But let's see what happens when we accelerate the simulation speed. Now you're able to see stuff moving, from the planet's surface faster and faster. So in this one, it's actually pretty, I think we just accidentally got launched into space out of the gravitational pull of all the other planets. There they are, slowly receding further and further away from us, which is, if I understand correctly, one of the potential outcomes. This is very, very sad. Basically, you can imagine everyone on the planet, at this point, probably long dead. But if they were still somehow managed to remain alive in some sort of a underground bunkers and they were able to see the stars, they would see their home sort of solar system, the three stars slowly receding into space. Wow. All right, that was rather depressing. Let's try it again. All right, so here we are once again. It's interesting because it's a little bit different each time. So now it looks like we're starting around the yellow sun. So we see the yellow sun as the closest object to us. And now we got caught up by the red gravitational pull. And let's accelerate the simulation and see what happens. So here on the bottom, as you can see, I've set it to 100x. So now it's going very, very fast. We're still hovering around the red planet. Oh, and we got caught up by the blue and we almost drifted off into space, but somehow luckily we got caught and we're back to going around the red sun once again. If you've seen the three body problem on Netflix, please, no spoilers. I'm like halfway through. Nobody spoil it for me. If you haven't, I'm very impressed with how well they did that. So far, really, really interesting. But this isn't me reviewing various Netflix shows. This is us testing Gemini 2.5 Pro, the new version. And I got to say, it's really good. It nails this prompt. It took a little bit going back and forth, but the thing that it was struggling with is the controls, right? So basically what I wanted to be able to do is I wanted to be able to easily click and drag and move this around to be able to zoom in, zoom out to see what's happening. And that took a few iterations to get right. And the planet view too was a little bit funky in the beginning. I had to make the FOV, the field of view, I had to keep sort of making it more and more like larger, I guess. So this is 120 degrees, so it's easier to see what's happening. If it's too zoomed in, you just basically have this giant red thing blur past your vision. But this is looking pretty good. So I think we got thrown out into space once again. Yes, or let's see, where's our little green planet? Okay, no, we're still there. Okay, so we're still alive. Very, very good. But this gets an A+ for me. The fact that it could, with just a few iterations, with a few back and forth, create something like this, I gotta say is very, very impressive. If we were to continue doing this, there's a number of other scenarios that we've seen in the series that would be interesting to simulate, like what happens when, what happens that the temperature on a planet increases too much or freezes too much, because like right now, everybody would be freezing, right? We're very, very, very far away from all the other suns. Or, for example, what happens if we get thrown out into space, which I think that just happened once again. Yeah, I think we're kind of receding away from our suns. But, we can definitely make this more complicated, more of a simulation. But as it is right now, I've got to say, very impressed. It's very cool. This is run through the canvas feature that they have, and the canvas feature works phenomenally well. Up here you have a little console that if there's any issues shows up here, and there's a big button that says fix issues. You just click it and Gemini 2.5 Pro fixes the issues. So I gotta say, yeah, I mean, this is an A+ for me. So to test Gemini 2.5 Pro, I wanted to create an idle incremental game. If you've ever played those, I have a certain fascination with them. But this one is called the Idle Villager Empire, which I think is phenomenal. So let me reset it and kind of show you how it works. So the initial prompt was, let's create an idle incremental game, start with resources like villagers, wood, iron, and stone, which it did. This is not the first iteration, but here's kind of how it works. I've added testing controls, as you can see, so I can 10x the speed, I can 100x the speed. We have multiple villagers that we can assign to various roles like woodcutters and farmers. Notice that very little of this did I sort of explain to it how to do. A lot of this, it just kind of understands the game, so it builds a lot of the initial sort of mechanics very, very well, very intelligently, without too much input. Now I can tweak and test things and correct things, but initially it starts out very, very well. Initially just built out the initial villager assignments and the few buildings and upgrades, after which I just said something along the lines of more updates and building types, which it did, adding a granary, small huts, forges, and various updates. Now, as I was testing this, at some point it ran into an issue because the amount of total sort of storage for wood that we could have was less than was needed to make the next upgrade to be allowed to store more wood, if that makes sense. So it basically created a game-breaking bug that you couldn't progress past. Here's where things got kind of interesting for me, because what I did was, hang on, saying my villagers are starving. So it added some sort of a villager starvation mechanic. Sorry, I had to add some more farmers or that was just going to bother me. Okay, we're done. We're good. I think my villagers are safe. But when we ran into that issue, the game-breaking bug, now I could sit down and think through what the issue was and explain it in text to Gemini and be like, here's what happened and here's how you fix it and blah, blah, blah. But this thing's pretty smart, I gotta say. So what I did was I just took a screenshot, I uploaded it to the LLM, and I said, problem, can't continue. Now, before you ask, yes, I have the sort of the language capacity to be able to explain it better than that. But on purpose, I didn't want to. I said, problem can't continue, give it the screenshot to see if it could, in fact, figure out what the issue was. Here's what that screenshot looked like. So here's kind of a zoomed in version of that image. So as you can see here, first of all, notice that wood is 100 out of 100. The logs are screaming repeatedly that the food storage is full, but actually also so is the wood storage, if you can see it up here. And in order to get more wood storage, we have to upgrade the granary. Or actually, in this case, we would have to upgrade the warehouse, which increases max wood, stone, and iron storage. And to build that, you would need 150 wood. The problem is that the wood is capped at 100. So you see, you kind of have to connect a couple of different pieces of data together. First, you have to notice that the wood is full. We're at maximum wood. In order to increase the wood sort of capacity, the storage ability, we would need to build this thing, right? So we have to understand that this is what increases max wood, and that the cost is 150, which is greater than the 100 that we have here. So again, I mean, it's not, I wouldn't call it trivial. Obviously, this is not rocket science, but you got to know how these games work. You have to put two and two together. And more importantly, you have to do something that's a little bit more difficult for these models sometimes to do, which is kind of like that visual reasoning. My guess is a lot of models would fail this little test right here. But this new Gemini 2.5 Pro experimental, so the 5.6 version, or the I/O update as they're calling it, so it figured it out. It goes, I see the problem, and it explains the problem. If we look at the thinking, so step one is, it goes, I need to get relevant content to answer the user's question. So it understands, like, okay, he gave me a screenshot, I need to kind of figure out what is it that he's trying to get me to understand here. And so it just goes through and it sort of lists the key information. And basically that's all the information. So notice it tracks the amount of villagers, the amount of food, the amount of wood and stone and iron. Shows, how much we're getting of each resource per second. It notices the log, is repeated food storage is full messages, how many unassigned village. So this to me is just incredible, because notice what kind of a detail it gets into, including noticing which buttons are disabled or grayed out, right? So it kind of knows that if a button is grayed out, that means something, like we don't have enough materials, or that hasn't been unlocked yet. Like it knows that okay, this is disabled for some reason. So it figures out that the resources are at their maximum capacity, all of them. And therefore the user, personified in this case by me, can't build whatever upgrades, like any of the upgrades that we're supposed to be building. And this is what's so fascinating to me. As far as I can tell, first and foremost, nothing here is bolded. As far as I can tell, no words are bolded except one. Again, I might be missing something, but I only see one bolded word, which is warehouse. This sentence to me is kind of brilliant, because it goes, the immediate bottleneck is the warehouse. The player has 0 warehouses. This is kind of fascinating to look at, because it's so much like human reasoning. It's in a lot of ways, I would say, similar to human reasoning, right? So it takes the vast amount of data that's in that image, right? Maybe not vast, but there's a lot of different things that you need to kind of keep in mind to figure out what's working, what's not. It goes through all of them and figures out what are the problems, what are the sort of the things that we can be building. And really, in that one sentence, it's sort of like hammers the solution, right? Sort of like the root cause analysis, and it nails it to one sentence, right? There's a bottleneck, and that immediate bottleneck is the warehouse. Notice warehouse is the only word in this entire thing that's bolded. If you had to boil it down to just one word, it would be warehouse, right? And then based on this, it figures out what the issue is. Oh, we can't buy a warehouse because we don't have enough wood. We can't have enough wood because there's a capacity issue. And so it goes through and starts, resetting all the stuff to where it needs to be. Notice it doesn't just change that one thing. It changes quite a few things kind of based on what it saw, to be like, all right, there's a sort of, we can optimize the resources here, how the resource production versus use is played out. And it gently turns a few knobs here and there to make the game better. A lot of people right now don't believe that, coding, or vibe coding, if you will, and stuff like that is ever going to be good enough to start affecting coders, etc. What I can tell you from where I'm sitting is that a year ago, this was impossible. Like, it would not be able to do this 1 year ago. 2 years ago, it couldn't even code, I think. It might produce some little script, but, we're getting to the point where we can show it a screenshot. And based on that screenshot, it's able to troubleshoot it and optimize the game. Do I even need to be the one? Does it need a human being to take that screenshot and post it in there? It can do it itself. So we're not that far away from this being kind of a loop, an automated loop where it does this stuff itself. Anyway, so that's the thinking. And here, it's sort of the summary to the user. So it's, I see the problem. Here's the problem. Here's what I fixed. Kind of gives you a brief little summary. What's also super interesting, it's also saying, oh, I also corrected the small visual bug with the time buttons. I didn't say anything about the time buttons. Like, it just noticed there was some issue that I probably didn't even notice, right? It's noticed it though. He's like, oh yeah, I got this whatever visual thing wrong. Let me correct that while I'm at it. Anyways, so with this idle villager empire, again, I would give it an A+. At this point, you would start building more advanced stuff. You would add more things on top. But by the way, in the beginning, it suggests some of the potential things that you can do. It kind of tells you how the progression is going to be played out, and also some of the potential things that you can add to make it better. Here it has next steps in design, right? So refine numbers. That's actually the first thing that we kind of ended up doing. Then we need to start thinking about the unlock tree, as well as kind of the mathematical progression of the game. So usually it's some sort of an exponential increase in things. Notice also that the game looks pretty good, right? Without us telling it how to do anything better, it's really kind of created a good looking game. Now we can change the UI as much as we want to, but from the beginning it added these little sort of UI elements, and overall it looks pretty good. Like the things that are grayed out, it makes sense where you can push, where you shouldn't push, where you have more available resources, where you can build and upgrade versus what you can't. And the current game speed is reflected here. I got to give it an A for this. In fact, just because of that screenshot ability, the ability to troubleshoot by looking at the screenshot, I actually got to give it an A plus. That was incredibly interesting to see how it thought through everything, how well it reasoned, the visual reasoning aspect of it. So definitely, I would say an A plus. All right, so I wanted to create a 3D solar system simulator that I'm able to play kind of as a web app. And it did it. So here it is. Let's check it out. Let's reset it. So as you can see here, it resets the system and I'm able to increase the simulation speed. So basically how fast everything is running. Let's slow it down and take a look at what we have here. So as you can see here, it's 3D. It's showing the orbits. It's showing all the planets. If we get close to a planet and click on it, we do have some information here in the top left. Now it'd be very easy to populate the entirety of it with more information, but you know, I'm sure it can do that, so I'm not too worried about that. I was more interested in seeing how well it can do the 3D aspects of it. And what we can do is we can sort of lock in on a planet by clicking on it like this. And then what happens as we increase speed, we will sort of follow, our gaze will follow that planet, and you know, we're able to move in and kind of track it like this. We can still move around it and kind of see as it revolves around the sun. If you're wondering what the heck is Saturn doing, well, that's not a bug. It actually does wobble a little bit. So as you can see here, if we increase it, the rings do kind of like oscillate a little bit. It does seem like it's wobbling. So yeah, it kind of looks a little bit freaky when you run it at a full speed. But there is Saturn, the ringed jewel of the solar system. So all in all, I got to give it an A. There's a few things that I thought it should be able to do that it wasn't able to do. For example, I was trying to get it to replace sort of like the stars with something that looked like the Milky Way. So something that's a little bit more kind of like a beautiful rendition of the Milky Way. And it basically put a 3D cube and it was like Milky Way, and it kind of gave coordinates of the various things. So I guess in that situation, I would be able to come in, actually find those images and tell it, okay, use this image for the different sort of, because imagine being in a box, in a cube, and you know, you'd have one image on the roof, on the floor, and on each one of the sides, which I guess would be kind of an interesting visual, but I decided to just go with the stars. You know, there's a few minor graphical issues in the beginning, like the stars were way too bright and it really took away, and the planets were kind of pale, so you weren't able to see them quite as well. So I had to dim the stars a little bit, if you will, and I also had to make the planets a little bit more, like just the color scheme a little bit different. But I gotta say, you know, it knew that I probably would want to be able to pan like this, and it used the right mouse button for that. And maybe I want, you know, the left mouse button kind of spins everything around. I had to add the functionality to where if you click on it, you're able to zoom in and kind of just watch it go around its orbit. But overall, I gotta say, definitely a solid A here. It did very, very well with just a few back and forth. I mean, it nailed it in one shot at it, but then I wanted some tweaks here and there. It nailed the tweaks. Everything is just phenomenal. The prompt, if you're interested, was create a 3D simulation of the solar system, make clicking on planets show some interesting data about them, add controls for speed. Actually, at some point, it did make the sun massive and completely dark. Like it was just this black circle against the stars. That was kind of ominous a little bit. I was like, no, let's make it red. Other than that, just phenomenal. All right, so this is a 2D city sim. Basically, I created a 2D city that you can run around and zoom in, zoom out, see what's happening. There are little players that are walking around, or NPCs, I guess. They have certain amounts of money that they spend at the various stores around the city. Stores such as Global Systems and United Core and Global Limited. It is just phenomenal names. But here's the thing. You start out with a few bucks, $1,000 in this case, and you're able to purchase these. So you can see the price there. This one is $772, for example. You're able to purchase these things by coming up to them and pushing B. So I can purchase down, for example. Let's see if there's some cheaper businesses that I can purchase. So let me see. I'm going to buy this Ace Goods by pushing B. So now this business is mine. I am moving up in the world and all that. Okay, so now some of these customers that are walking around may choose to visit my establishment and purchase some money. As they do, the business, sort of their cash reserves grow. I can come in and hit E to collect that money, therefore growing my net worth, if you will. And for example, now I might be able to buy another business if one is cheap enough. Let's see, most of them are. Usually you have to wait a little bit before you can buy a second one, but let me see if, yeah, I don't think there's anything right now within the price range. But one thing you can do to kind of hustle and improve the business flow is give people coupons by approaching them and hitting the C button. Wait, did I not purchase one? I did. I purchased this one. All right, let's see. So if I approach a customer, I can push the C button. Okay, so that's a bug. I just realized, okay, that I might have to fix. 1 second. All right, so apparently some of those are office buildings, not shops, which, caused the issue. So let's make sure we buy a shop, Tech Grand. So we're going to buy this one. And now we own it, so we can collect, whatever $19 they had in there. But now what that's going to allow us to do is, harass various strangers on the streets and give them coupons to go buy stuff from us. So let's see if we can find, yes, here's an unsuspecting stranger. So as you can see here, we have a circle around him. So if we hit C, boom, coupon given. Now there's a cooldown for how many coupons you can give. And eventually I wanted to also add some sort of either a mini game or just something that's a little bit more random to see whether or not coupons worked. So we can pretty easily add that functionality. But these are cars, by the way, that are moving up and down streets, just FYI. So far, they don't really have any functionality, but at some point, maybe we would be able to GTA them, or maybe they just, hit you if you're not careful. Here's one person up, we give him a coupon, and now he's heading over to my business to buy something at Tech Grand or whatever it's called. And so basically that's the game. Basically what I want to see is its ability to generate both the customers and the buildings on the fly to create kind of a city that's more or less alive, and to see how much functionality we can add to it as a player to be able to run around and add stuff in this 2D world. So everything worked very, very well. There's quite a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes that took a while to get here. So for example, these little dots that are sitting inside of buildings, they are actually employees that work at those locations. So when you reset the game in the morning, they all sort of wander in here and then start heading to their respective places of business. And they work there. So basically the idea here for me was, if people have tested out or saw that game called Schedule 1, right? It's a very interesting game. Think Breaking Bad meets South Park or something like that, but it's a living, breathing game where each character kind of has their own schedule. They wake up, they do stuff, and then they go to work if they have a job, etc. So at different parts of the day, you can find them in different locations. And I kind of wanted to see if I can build something, resembling that. So right now, so far, this is able to quickly create the code needed to start something like this. Now, of course, the more stuff we create, the harder it is going to be to do just this inside of this chatbot. You're probably going to need something like Cursor or Windsurf. But I got to say, it's extremely easy to jump in and quickly create something to kind of prototype it and just see how it looks. So you can very rapidly just iterate through it. And once you have kind of the starting code, you can actually copy it into whatever IDE, whatever environment you want, and then start developing it there. So this one surprisingly had the most amount of errors, even though it was 2D, but that didn't seem to make it any easier. I would give it like a B+ on this one, because we had a number of issues. Things would constantly break. It wouldn't render, but so kind of had to go back and forth quite a bit to make it work. But at the end, it did a lot of the things that I wanted it to. All right, so after messing around with this thing for a few hours, I gotta say I am very impressed. The canvas definitely allows for a lot of cool stuff to be done here. You're able to quickly prototype what you're trying to do, see it appear right there in within the web app, so you don't have to leave or take the code and go somewhere else to try to run it. So this makes it a lot easier for beginners, people that might not know how to code or how to develop stuff. Makes it very, very easy for them to just create stuff on the fly and test it out. This little icon right here, that's show console, and this is the console. And whenever there's issues, when you go in here, the errors will appear in the console. So as an example here, this is the app that simulates walking around the city with the traffic, with the grid and stuff like that. So as you can see here, nothing's working. I can change the day-night cycle, but nothing happening. If I click on the console, and I can make it larger. As you can see here, it's giving us an error message. It's literally telling us what the problem is. So what you can do is click on Fix Errors, and that will automatically be submitted to the model that you're working with, Gemini 2.5 Pro in this case, and it's going to take a crack at it and see if it can fix it. So this is making troubleshooting a lot easier. So as you can see here, the issue here is too many active light sources in the scene. So it's not going to use traffic lights to use emissive materials instead of point light objects. So the traffic light boxes will glow, but they won't cast light on other objects, reducing the number of shader uniforms required. And hopefully we'll also see some vehicle headlights. And of course, the other big thing is the version control. So you're able to go back and forth between the various versions, cycle back and forth, which is a big deal. I mean, again, for professional developers, this is not GitHub. So, a lot of this stuff is going to be kind of old news. You're not going to be using this if you're trying to create something that's, enterprise or anything that's quote unquote serious. But for a lot of people, they're just messing around with this and learning about coding. I mean, this just made everything a lot more, let's say, kid friendly, right? Or for anyone that's trying to pick this up from scratch, you have a very simple, brain dead simple version control right here. Back arrow and forward arrow to cycle through the versions. It's phenomenal. Also, you're able to save it, and you're also able to very, very easily share it. So if you click the share button, you get a code, you can give that code to somebody else, and they're able to just run whatever you've built. Gives them a warning message like, hey, somebody else built this, so you better trust them. I'll post the link to this thing in the description if you want to test it out. You can trust me, wink, wink. No, but obviously there's I hope nothing bad in the code. If there is, I didn't put it in there. But for example, for this 3D solar simulation, if I click the share, right here's kind of what that looks like. And if I click copy link, I don't even need to be logged into Google. Like this is an incognito window, and I'll just use that link here. So as you can see here, I am not logged in, and it's saying, this is a user-generated content. And if you wanted to see it, you just click that, and you're able to interact with my beautiful, beautiful simulation of the solar system in which we currently reside with the weird, wobbly Saturn, which is realistic, I think you can say. You're also able to view the code, right? So we're able to share the code, and you can just copy and paste it. You can click try Gemini for yourself and, the canvas, and you can kind of build on top of this, etc. Now, the canvas itself is not going to work for everything. So for example, if you're trying to build something with Python, it looked like it attempted to run it, but it wasn't able to. It gave me an error message, but it is able to export it to Google Colab. So if not there, you can take it to Google Colab, which is maybe just slightly more complicated for beginners, but still very, very easy, very intuitive. And you're able to run Python code and stuff like that within Colab. So it's absolutely incredible to see Google putting all this stuff out. Because keep in mind, like a lot of this stuff is free, or at least free for a lot of it. And then if you want some advanced features, you pay a little bit extra, but a lot of it is free. A lot of it gets you to be able to use some of these AI models and test them out and learn how to do them without necessarily needing to pay some subscription fee, share it with your friends. Google makes everything fairly safe. I mean, I'm sure there's a way to run into trouble with it, but I feel like for the most part, they tend to care about safety and privacy and stuff like that. So they'll try to protect you from stuff as much as possible. So it's probably hard to get into trouble, although I'm sure it's still possible. And in the meantime, while I was talking, the console issue that we've had in here, it got fixed. And now, as you can see here, everything's working. So these things, I mean, you can kind of tell what it did, right? So they're still bright, but as you can see here, they're not casting a light on the floor. So now apparently this is just a little bit more stable. I'm still not seeing, oh no, there are headlights on these cars. Wow, those are actually pretty cool, very bright. So these are sort of true light objects or light points, whatever it referred to them as, whereas the street lights or the traffic lights, they just sort of appear to glow, but they're not casting any light on the surrounding area. I mean, that's pretty cool. Other than it's sort of, shining in the wrong direction, I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed with a lot of the stuff that it did here. But let me know what you think. Are you impressed by this? Is this interesting? Does this seem like it's a pretty big jump in the web development abilities, the fact that you can just do all this stuff within your web browser? Because keep in mind, Gemini 2.5 Pro, it was the reigning king. Claude 3.7 Sonnet, I mean, it was also, I guess, right there. It's hard to say that one was better than the other across all things, but they were definitely close. Gemini 2.5 Pro, I feel like, was better across a wide variety of tasks. It had that 1 million context window. I have yet to test out the actual model outside of the canvas, but I got to say this canvas definitely sort of, it catches up to Claude's ability as far as being able to do the canvas and kind of just render everything in here. The web development stuff so far seems very, very good, and very excited to see the full model that's coming very soon. But for the time being, what do you think about this? Google seems to be just going across all fronts and trying to build up all the features that it's been lacking. And if Anthropic and OpenAI, if they have a feature, it's trying to build its own vision of that. And it seems to be doing a great job so far. But let me know what you think if you made this far. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Wes Roth, and I'll see you next time.